Hello, everyone. My name is Pragna Nidumolu, and I'm the founder of EcoTeens, which is a nonprofit initiative to bring together people from all across the world to talk about sustainability and climate change. Today, we have a very, very special guest, Professor Stuart Hart.
Hi, Pragna. Yeah, great to be with you and EcoTeens. So I'm, I guess you would say sort of a serial professor and center starter. I've been at a variety of universities over the last 35, 40 years. Always in the business school, Michigan, North Carolina, Cornell, and then most recently the University of Vermont. And the focus, pretty much my sole focus since the late 80s, has been how do we shift business education and how do we shift the strategies of companies such that they could actually solve social and environmental problems through business and make money doing it.
That's incredible, and I can't wait to get to know what work you're doing. So let's just jump right into the questions.
Sounds good.
So, your work has been very, very influential in sustainable business. So, how do you see the role of young people like me and other people who are passionate about sustainability in shaping the future of sustainable enterprise?
Well, I mean, it's your time. That really it's your generation has to be the one that actually brings about the transformation that we need. So as I've said, in my introduction, I've spent the last 35, 40 years, trying to slam away at this, right? And there has been the emergence of this field called sustainable business, which dates back to the late 80s, early 90s in terms of its inception. But it was decidedly incrementalist, right? It was, what legitimized it was the idea of eco-efficiency. The notion being, you create less waste, emit fewer emissions, and you can save money and reduce risk, right? It can drop to the bottom line. That's what made sustainable business acceptable and relevant within first the business community and then business schools. And it sort of branched out from there, right? Kind of from eco-efficiency and pollution prevention to the broader value chain, thinking about product stewardship. How do we think about the life cycle impacts of products? Kind of how do we think about sustainable sourcing and product take back and design to be taken back and so forth. All of that's really important work, right? But I think that's really what's consumed the field of sustainable business since the 90s, is that I think of those as strategies for greening, in that it reduces negative impact of existing products and processes. But it doesn't really get to what we need, which is larger scale transformation. And I wrote about this, in the late 90s, had a paper in the late 90s in Harvard Business Review with the title Beyond Greening, Strategies for a Sustainable World. And those kinds of strategies are more transformational. In other words, as companies, especially incumbent companies, we may have core technologies that are inherently unsustainable, whether it's fossil fuels or, we can go down the list. And greening strategies can reduce the negative impact, but they're never going to make them inherently clean, regenerative, or sustainable. For that, we need wholesale shift in underlying technology and core competency in companies. Those are truly kind of transformational innovation strategies. And we also have to figure out how we harness the power of business and enterprise to address inequality and poverty in the world, right? So how do we harness commerce to serve and lift the underserved at the base of the income pyramid, those who have been left behind in the developed world, and like here in America over the last 30 or 40 years in deindustrialized communities across the country. It's up to us as business people to figure out how we get after that, right? And that's going to take strategy innovation on a level and scale that we haven't yet realized. It's probably also going to take government. So I think we arrive at a time where it's become evident, and I have, as we were chatting before we started, Pragna, I have this new book that just came out, the title of which is Beyond Shareholder Primacy. So, previous work, been things like Beyond Greening. I had a book 20 years ago called Capitalism at the Crossroads. But most of that work was around, strategies that companies can currently take that can drive value within the current, kind of way capitalism is run, which in America is shareholder primacy, right? Since the 80s, capitalism has been run using an operating system that shareholders come first. That,
Right.
that it's really the job of management to drive share price first and foremost, and the way you drive share price is by maximizing short-term profitability, quarterly earnings growth, and so forth. That's been the dominant logic since the 80s. It wasn't always that way, right? And in this new book that I've published, Beyond Shareholder Primacy, I look back over the last 400 years, the inception of capitalism, which dates back to the mercantilist era and companies like the British East India Company, which is where that's the source code of capitalism. But it's evolved and gone through transformations over the last 400 years. And it's only in the last 40 that we've seen once again capitalism revert to its source code, which is profit first, profit maximization, externalization of negative impacts, extraction of resources, and in the British East India Company's case, subjugation of populations and enslavement as business model. Now, we've managed to get past the enslavement part, but extraction of resources and externalization of negative impacts, and in some cases subjugation, still persist. And so it's up to us, but to go back to your original question, it's going to be your generation's job to actually transform capitalism into a sustainable form, because we've just reached the point now where the actions of individual companies operating within the current system of capitalism simply can't get it done.
I totally agree. I think my generation has a lot of work to do, especially because a lot of people don't even believe in this yet. So getting to that area is the first step. But yes, I totally agree.
Yep.
So you've worked on the base of the pyramid concept. So how do you think that young entrepreneurs can innovate to address both poverty and climate change at the same time? Like you mentioned, catering to the unequal distribution of all that.
No, I think it's really important because this has been sort of a central part of the work I've been doing now for, again, a couple of decades. It still hasn't come to fruition, at least in part because of the strictures of capitalism, right? That especially for public companies, when you're under a microscope to generate short-term earnings, it sometimes is difficult for leadership to take the kinds of more transformative, long-term, big bet kind of investments that are needed in order to realize these changes. So how we bring serving the underserved together with inherently clean and regenerative technology, I think, is the opportunity of the future. And it can happen because so many next generation technologies are disruptive in character. If you know the work of Clayton Christensen, who was at Harvard Business Review, and the idea of disruptive innovation, meaning that these technologies, many of things like distributed generation of renewable energy, point of use water treatment, online healthcare, right? Direct sort of patient, kind of virtual healthcare. We can go down the list of disruptive technologies in the sense that should they come to fruition, they would disrupt the current business model entirely, right? That distributed generation of renewable energy can make central fossil fuel generation of electricity and power obsolete. It can end up being less expensive, more efficient, and entirely renewable. And it turns out that with such technologies, it's often easier to start the commercialization in underserved spaces for two reasons. One, there isn't already a built-out infrastructure for power, so you're not competing. And two, the incumbents that often own and control that established infrastructure, like, say, utilities in America or in the developed world, are their incumbents, and that means they're going to defend their current investment. The last thing they want to see is a leapfrog innovation that makes them obsolete. So they will do everything in their power to preserve the status quo and make sure that the kinds of sort of forward-leaning regulations or policies that would encourage these kinds of innovations either don't happen or are watered down. So we're beginning to see a change on that front in the U.S. We saw things like Build Back Better and the Inflation Reduction Act and so forth, which are at least a start on policies, public policies that actually incent and encourage these kinds of next generation technologies. But it still, I think, is the case that many such technologies are most effectively implemented first in the underserved space for all the reasons I've just cited. You don't have building codes that prevent it. You don't have incumbents that block it. In many cases it's easier to pull off. One of the best examples of this is an old friend and colleague who was the founder in Bangladesh of a company called Grameen Phone. And Grameen Phone, of course, partnered with Grameen Bank of Mohammed Yunus fame, but it wasn't, the bank was a partner, right? But Grameen Phone was the first such business to bring mobile phone service, wireless telecommunications to the rural villages in Bangladesh and connected to them to the first time. And in order for such phones to be connected and operate, they need electric power. And that happened via solar recharging. So it was a huge builder, a builder of the market of distributed solar, right? Small scale, decentralized solar generation. And the business model was to loan money from the Grameen Bank to village entrepreneurs that would sell the phone services in the village. Most of those turned out to be women. They were called phone ladies back in the 90s when it started, right? It's obviously evolved a lot since then. But the point is, it was a very innovative business model involving microcredit for micro-entrepreneurship, where phone ladies sell the phone service, earn substantial livelihoods by doing so, and then just create all kinds of economic activity, because now suddenly the village is connected to information and markets and so forth, which it never was before. So it had, Grameen Phone has had a huge positive impact on the sustainable economic development of Bangladesh in general. And today, Grameen Phone is the largest corporation in Bangladesh. So, so to me, this is a prime example of how you can think out of the box, right? Like it's a guy named Iqbal Kadir who's the founder. Iqbal Kadir today is in Boston. He has a fellow appointment at Harvard. He was at MIT previously, and and is now involved with his brother in a new venture in Bangladesh called bKash, which is the largest mobile money company in the world. Another disruptive innovation, right? That can disrupt banking almost entirely. So I think a lot of tomorrow's technologies, that leapfrog, that are disruptive and also have the characteristic of being sustainable, in some cases regenerative, can start first most effectively with imagination and with business model innovation in the underserved space at the base of the income pyramid. That's certainly true in the developing world, but I think it's also increasingly true right here in America when it comes to, bringing economic development and jobs back to the communities that were left behind by deindustrialization, right, over the course of the 80s and 90s, during that period of time when shareholder primacy and neoliberalism took root.
I think that example of the phone ladies is so interesting. Like, you're right, it's disruptive, but it's also so innovative. Like it's so helpful to those communities. So that's incredible. Thank you for sharing that.
Yep.
Yeah, that's amazing. So talking about innovation, your work often emphasizes it. So how can young people drive innovation and sustainability, especially in already established companies that might be resistant to change, as are most companies right now?
Right. So as we've just been discussing, I'd say there's two levels to that.
Mm-hmm.
One is how to become an effective change maker, change agent inside the company, right? Which
Mm-hmm.
means recognizing that even as a young person, you have more agency than you think, right? That it's not just a matter of doing your job well, and saluting. That you have agency inside a company. Obviously, you have to do your job well, but you also have agency to do more than that, right? To reach out, to identify kind of kindred spirits, to identify an initiative that you think would really be important for the company to undertake in the sustainability space, and then build the internal coalition to make it happen, right? It's within your power to do so. It's just a matter of realizing that you have that kind of agency and then getting started on it, So I think that's level one, right? Is to realize even just taking a starting job out of undergrad, right? Or if you're an MBA, kind of a job, maybe you're a manager, right, in a corporation. It's well within your power to actually become a change maker. Think of it as being a good term for it is tempered radical, right? That it's possible for you to be a change maker, and you should view your role that way. That actually can bring a lot more meaning to your work and your life than just saluting the flag and perpetuating the status quo in an incumbent firm. So that's level one. Level two, I think, is to realize that it's critical that the company and that companies in general and senior management in companies in particular become much more activist out there in the world to create the kind of system change that I just described, right? In other words, looking forward, we're going to need companies and business leaders to actually be on the right side of history. There's a program at the University of Michigan in the Ross School called Corporate Political Responsibility. And it was started by a professor named Tom Lyon, who wrote a paper with a wonderful title, that we need CPR for CSR.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah.
Corporate social responsibility are sort of that maybe is a little bit humdrum, and that what we need is companies to step up to the plate to align their lobbying, in other words, how they advocate in Washington and state governments or even internationally from a policy, from a regulatory point of view, that needs to be consistent with their stated purpose, mission, and sustainability goals. Too often companies speak out of both sides of their mouth, right? So it becomes increasingly important that companies and business leaders speak with one voice, a consistent message, and this is what we stand for, and to be kind of advocates, what Paul Pullman, the former CEO of Unilever, called net positive advocates. So rather than trying to, lobby to stop innovation or to preserve the status quo, it's time for business leaders to lobby to shift the game, right? That includes kind of shifting the policies when it comes to the ground rules for capitalism itself, because it's incumbent upon us to create a new, truly sustainable form of capitalism that rewards long-term thinking, that rewards long-term strategy, and that rewards strategies that serve all of the stakeholders.
This is really inspirational to the people watching, especially to the younger people, knowing that we can actually make a change. I think this gives a lot of hope to me and a lot of people, because this is what I want to do with my life, and knowing that it's actually possible, and that, like you said, I do have some sort of agency if I'm in a company, that I can actually make a change.
Absolutely do. And beyond, not only do you have agency, but it's sort of crucial that you step up to the plate, because there just really isn't a lot of time left, right? That we've kind of squandered the on-ramp time we had, starting back in the 90s. Had we been able to actually move more transformationally, we wouldn't be where we are today, which is facing a climate crisis, a sixth extinction, and levels of inequality that are toxic, right? And that are creating societal backlash and populist revolt. I mean, that's where we are now, right? So there really is no on-ramp left, and my generation squandered that opportunity. So it's on your generation to bring it home. That's what it's going to take. And actually, I know we probably are about to finish. I have a wonderful little kind of story quote that, if I could tell,
Of course.
which I think summarizes this quite well. And it comes from a book by a guy named Mark Carney, who was the former governor of the Bank of Canada and then later the Bank of England. And he wrote a book called Values, Value, and then in parenthesis S. So it's a play on value and values, that came out a few years back. The subtitle is Building a Better World for All. And he tells a story of when he was at the Vatican for a dinner where the Pope hosted business leaders and financiers, like Wall Street people, hosted them, and then to kind of lead off the dinner, the Pope had a few remarks. And so this is Mark Carney telling that story, what the Pope said to kick off the dinner. And here's what he said. He said, "Our meal will be accompanied by wine. Now, wine is many things. It has a bouquet, color, and richness of taste that all complement the food. It has alcohol that can enliven the mind. Wine enriches our senses. At the end of the feast, we will have grappa. Grappa is one thing, alcohol. Grappa is wine distilled. Humanity is many things, passionate, curious, rational, altruistic, creative, self-interested. But the market is one thing, self-interested. The market is humanity distilled. Your job is to turn grappa back into wine, to turn the market back into humanity. That is your challenge."
Wow, that's incredibly well written, and I think that summarizes life right now, honestly, because we really do need to go back to that. We need to find the humanity in everything, because I think that's something that we've really, really lost.
Indeed.
So, thank you for sharing that.
Yep.
Amazing. So just a couple more questions. Looking ahead into the future, what gives you hope about the future of sustainable business, and how do you see the next generation, like people in EcoTeens, playing a part in that future? And what advice would you give to them to prepare for careers that prioritize both profit and planet?
Well, I mean, what gives me hope is people like you,
Mm.
frankly, right? And the what you're doing at this, in terms of building EcoTeens. I mean, I think that gives me tremendous hope, right? That
Thank you.
I mean, I mean, what you're doing already is amazing, right? And so that gives me tremendous hope, right? That I mean, when I was your age, I wasn't thinking this way. I can tell you that for certain, right? Because these issues were not front and center the way they are today. When I was your age, and that was a long time ago. I mean, certainly there were plenty of social issues and plenty of issues for sure,
Right.
but I was not thinking about them with the level of sophistication that you are at your age, and so that gives me tremendous hope. And I'm pretty confident that you guys, that next gen is gonna bring this home, because that's what it's gonna take.
That really does mean a lot. Thank you. And what advice would you have for the next generation when they're choosing careers and trying to prioritize profitability and sustainability at the same time?
Well, I would say don't shy away from going into the what we might think of as the belly of the beast. In other words, I think a lot of people that are well intended, that are idealistic, maybe where you are right now, get into university or get into business school and end up becoming it changes the way they look at the world. So don't allow that to happen. And so either people go down two tracks. Either once they're in business school, either they're repelled at some level and say, well, I just want to go into like the B Corp world, or a clean tech startup, or else it goes to the other extreme, which is I need to pay back my debt, so it's Wall Street, or else consulting. Don't necessarily fall prey to either of those extremes. Don't be afraid to actually take a job in an existing large corporation and become a change agent from within. I think that there's not enough of that going on now. I think people that remain idealistic seek out, kind of benefit corporation, kinds of, and I don't mean diminish those. I think that's great, or something in the clean tech world or inclusive business world, because it fits their values, and that's what they're comfortable wanting to pursue. It's consistent with their values. Or else, you end up, just essentially getting the degree and then needing to make money to pay back the debt. So you take the job that pays the most. And
Right.
increasingly, business schools today aren't really business schools. They're finance and consulting schools.
Yes.
And what I think, so I think what we really need, what you guys need to focus on is transformation of the existing industries that we have. And a lot of that can be done from within, and that's what it's going to take. Big companies can disrupt themselves. We don't have to wait for them to collapse, because that has tremendous social consequences. When large firms collapse, that has real consequences. So they will, one way or the other. In other words, those next gen startups, those clean tech startups, eventually they will prevail. They have to, right? But that can be really wrenching, and it can have, you know, really disruptive societal consequences. So a better scenario is transforming existing large corporations from within.
I totally agree, and that is my goal in life, to be a part of some bigger corporation and create change, because I think in the sustainability space, at least from a couple of my peers that I've talked to, they look down upon like being part of the corporate world, but also preaching sustainability. They say it's like, you know, going against my own, like what I'm saying. But I'm trying to, you know, the only way you can break a system is from within, right? And I think that like you said, being a change maker from within a corporation is so important, and that's exactly what I want to do. And also, one of the other points you made, saying that when people go to college, like their view on the world changes. I think that's what's so great about Michigan, that the Herb Institute, having Ross and the School of Sustainability mixed together, really gives you two different perspectives, and you still leave with that business degree, but you have new perspectives on the world, and you can actually, you know, make change with it. So I think the work you're doing is incredible, and I think Michigan is incredible, and it really means a lot that you're here today talking to me about this.
It's been my pleasure.
Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one.